CNN ratings hit a low watermark this week. On Monday, not a single show cracked 1 million viewers. Cuomo Primetime with Chris Cuomo came close. He got 919,000 total viewers. That amounted to only 191,000 in the key demo for advertisers. That would be ages 25 to 54.
Congratulations to Chris for getting half of Rising on the same day. Democratic strategist Roger Fisk and co-host of the Realignment podcast, Marshall Kossoff, they're here to discuss. So we wanted to pump this story together with one more. Let's put this up there on the screen. The New York Times exploring a buy of The Athletic, which is a sports subscription website. The Times just becoming a behemoth, bigger, bigger, and bigger. It seems that we're in a time of immense change within the media industry, Marshall. What do you make of these two developments?
Yeah, so I love how you juxtapose these two stories because they're actually incredibly tied together because they're unified by the same phenomenon, which is that the Trump era the centrality of politics during the Trump era was really good for a lot of media companies, especially ones that were focused on national politics. The New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, etc. So during that period, the New York Times, as they pivoted from a advertising business model to a subscription business model, picked up millions of new subscribers. And their goal is to get to 10 million subscribers by 2025. That would fundamentally transform and fuel their business. The thing is, as we've pivoted from politics and quote unquote become more normal as a country, whatever that means, you've seen these brands have to continue gaining subscribers, which is difficult because when your pitch was Trump, politics, engagement, Maggie Haberman, that's not going to drive subscribers the same way. So when you have a company like The Athletic, a company which is actually really built in to local news because their coverage of they cover sports. I'm a subscriber. They've got really excellent coverage of local teams, cities. They've actually gone international. There's lots of stuff there. The New York Times, what they're doing is if they're not going to be able to just dominate in politics, they're actually going to become a bigger bundle of sports, of culture. That's selling the New York Times cooking app. That's bundling all this together. And it's just a really strong business. And it just shows that the strong brands who are able to give something of value are going to be able to transcend when ones like CNN, who all they can really offer are just that straight politics angle, are going to struggle.
Yeah. That is the interesting thing about this moment is you have a dichotomy between, on the one hand, these media organs are larger and more powerful than ever, even as, and you can see this in all of the cable news ratings and the fall off in all news traffic, even as some of the weaknesses and cracks in their models are starting to show, Roger.
Yeah, and good morning. Thank you so much for having me, and I always love being on with Marshall. You know, and to build on his point a little bit, all the trends that were in place before the Trump administration were essentially coming back now in full ferocity. It's almost like kind of how the virus is accelerating a lot of sociological trends in terms of consolidation and any number of other things. I agree with his analysis of why the Times is going about this because there's not a lot of things left that one can't do on demand, right? And one of the last things left is breaking news because it happens beyond the control of any one person's schedule, and sports because that is still a kind of a sovereign realm of activity that one can't just, watch at 9 or 10 at night because the news will already be out there about what happened and why. So it still has some magnetism in a marketing sense because it can't just be replicated whenever anyone wants. On the CNN thing, I also totally agree, which is, they're basically trying to find their footing right now. And the adrenaline, the kind of caffeine that both TV and the newspapers saw from the Trump administration is kind of gone. And as we've said before, they have to pivot back to kind of an Eisenhower era president where, the absence of social media, the absence of acidic, vitriolic statements coming out every day, that absence of that kind of hour by hour kind of rush that you would get, be it positive for his supporters or negative for his detractors, just isn't there. And people are now picking up exactly where they were 5 years ago and still trying to figure out their way forward.
Here's the question, though, Marshall. Can CNN pull off a pivot? Because all I've seen from Washington Post and more is that they're actually doubling down on the Trump strategy. If I'm Jeff Zucker or Discovery or whoever the hell runs it right now, I'd be like, listen, enough of this. We're going back to Malaysian MH370 and Stanley Tucci's Travels the World or whatever. Like, that's what's going to rate on this channel. But they don't seem to be doing that right now.
Well, I mean, I think... Let me show for CNN for a quick second. Yeah, right.
Like, trigger warning.
Trigger warning, risers. For a quick thing, this always happens. So every single time there's a big election, there's just a collapse in political interest. There's a bit of a cycle. So if you're CNN, you're thinking to yourself, look, obviously it's down. I mean, that's like, yeah, I'm glad you referenced MH3, the Malaysian airline, because that was 2014, right? When you're coming off of 2012, there's less political interest. But underlying this entire conversation is that, look, CNN still has a pretty decent business model. They still have the advertisers, they still have the cable bundle. So the big thing that they're going to have to think about, and if you're an executive there, is and we saw this in a bit of reporting this week about how MSNBC is exploring through Peacock, finding ways to get young people on board. How are we going to use this downtime to come into something stronger come 2022? So I'm skeptical, as I think anyone would be, trigger warning off, but I don't think we should expect everyone to tune into CNN and not this YouTube channel. But I think there's still something there.
Yeah, well, especially the MSNBC Peacock thing. One of their brilliant ideas for bringing in the young folks, Roger, was a show with Nicole Wallace. Everybody wants their
the youths
are all dying for more from Iraq war propagandists who already have, by the way, 2 hours on the channel. So if you want to watch her, you already got a thing there. And I guess that's the piece is Marshall's right. Their business model is fine, right? Even as ratings fall, they're getting the subscriber fee, the carry fees from the cable networks. So especially CNN, Fox News, they're doing fine revenue-wise. We're not predicting their collapse or anything like it. But in terms of their influence, especially with younger generations, as millennials, age like myself and really come into power throughout society, it seems to me over time that this is a hopeful take. Their influence is perhaps going to continue to wane when they just don't have that direct line into controlling all of the political culture in a way that Trump, even as ratings were great for them, they just banked on him creating the conversation, where before Trump, they were sort of able to create the conversation about whatever topic they wanted. In the Trump era, they allowed themselves to be buffeted around by whatever he wanted to talk about. And now that he's gone, it's like, well, we don't know what to do anymore, basically, because we don't have the king of programming to make sure that every hour we have sufficient content to talk about.
Yeah, what you see is the fragmentation, right? And you see it on both the right and the left. I think the whole idea of people gravitating towards one or two news sources is essentially over, which is why Newsmax and One America, et cetera, are building their own little niches and things like that. Another thing about, just to kind of broaden out the context a little bit, since I spend a decent amount of time in Asia, or at least used to, is how important CNN's global footprint is. I don't think we should lose track of that, because when you're abroad, it is a major pipeline for American news and American culture and things like that. So I think that needs to be on the table, because I have yet to be in a corner of the world that you can't find some of their shows, and for example, the Situation Room or whatever, still goes live all over the world. And then last is on our progressive media requiring kind of the villain. How odd is it that it could be very possible that Marjorie Taylor Greene is the kind of Mother Mary of MSNBC and CNN right now in terms of keeping some of that blood flowing on the kind of outrage machine?
Yeah, really good points. You're absolutely right about CNN International. Can't forget how important that is when you're outside of the U.S. It's basically what a lot of people watch at the time. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the analysis.
Great to see you guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
More Rising for you after this.